Welcome to Hello Grow.
The number one growth podcast in the world.
I'm Cortland Brady.
I'm Carlos Souza.
And today we have Clint Berry, and he is our first unicorn founder. And for those of you that do not know what a unicorn is, it's a privately held company that reaches a valuation of $1 billion. So we're freaking amped to have you on, Clint.
So excited to be here.
Yeah, we need to make very clear that we're punching above our weight, bringing Clint to the podcast.
100%.
I'm sorry that we're not big enough for you, Clint.
Stop.
Let's jump into his introduction. It's a fun intro, and I have tons of questions for you.
Okay.
So you joined a bunch of tech startups right after college, it looks like. And some of them you were the founder, some of them you were the co-founder, and some of them you were senior developer.
I don't even remember, but yeah, let's see which ones I put on LinkedIn. Is that where you got it?
Well, I jumped through all of those.
Okay.
And then you were at
MetaConnect?
MetaConnect.
Yeah.
You left MetaConnect, went to be the co-founder at Weave. And at Weave, that was in 2012.
Yeah. Well, November 2011. Yeah.
And then you guys, over the next 10 years, IPO'd that, took it to $1.8 billion.
Yeah, I actually left just like 4 months before the IPO, but yeah.
We can't wait to hear about that part of the story.
Okay.
After leaving Weave, then you started Forge, which is a nonprofit to help build tech leadership in Utah. And then you also started Kolla, which is a platform company that integrates different apps specifically focused on the optometry and dental spaces.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, first startups, why didn't the first ones work, and what made Weave different?
So many reasons. I don't know which ones were all there, but I've definitely done a handful. I did a SEO software company with a buddy. Yeah, and it's hard to get traction when you're naive. You come out of college and you're like, people just buy it, right? You like had no sales experience at all. And then it turned out I wasn't as interested in the SEO space as I thought I'd be. Like, well, this is just a giant game. It almost feels criminal. Like you're just like trying to trick Google. So it's not my favorite. I was like, I wasn't passionate about it. Went and wasn't a co-founder, but was the first developer hire of a multivariate testing company, software for changing out like wording and colors and changing websites to see if they perform better. And the owner took a chance on me, and it didn't. It was just not getting traction. And so typically what happens is I have a failed startup. I go work in corporate America to get some money, and then I go do another startup. And MetaConnect was the longest I ever made it in corporate America. It was 9 months. And
how long were you on this kind of on and off the roller coaster?
I mean, essentially since college, and then lots of times in the background, I was just doing my own dev shop where I'd just make websites for people, like whether it was WordPress or like e-commerce with Magento. I would make, that's how I would live for a lot of the time, was just make websites.
So this other opportunity comes up called Weave. You go and talk to Melissa. How do you convince her to say, hey, we're going to go hop back on this ride? I have a corporate job, been there for almost a year, but...
Yeah, that one was a hard one because, at the time she was like, this is the most fun our marriage has ever been when I was at MetaConnect, right? Because I just left at 5 every day, came home and hung out with her and the kids. And she's like, this is amazing. And I'm like, yeah, then you give her the pitch and I'm like, this, I have an opportunity here that could be something great. In fact, what's interesting though, is when Brandon recruited me over, it wasn't as a co-founder, right? So he paid a consulting firm to build the first version of the software. And they had 5 or 6, maybe up to 10 customers at the time. But I was the only developer he knew at that point, really, besides the leader of the consulting firm, which basically turned him down to come over. And then he's like, well, Clint, you're the only other guy I know. So do you want to come do this? And it just looked like a really great opportunity from a product standpoint. Being the first engineering hire, I knew that he would give me some equity at the time. But it ended up being, a little bit of a roller coaster there. So in the first year or whatever, we almost ran out of money. We're applying to incubators to get some cash. And he applied to Y Combinator, which is probably the most prestigious incubator in the Bay Area, maybe in the world. And they invited us for an interview. And at that point I was like, oh, this is huge. Like he knew what Y Combinator was, but I was a software engineer, right? So like I had been using their website forever, Hacker News, if you've heard of it. And so it was like a really big deal to even get an interview, which is awesome. Like the acceptance rate into those programs is really low. It was at the time anyway. And I told Brandon this later, but at the time I was like, I'm not really a co-founder here yet. And if we make it into YC, I'm just going to go find another company that doesn't have a technical co-founder and leave. That was what I was thinking, because I just want to be a founder, right?
You told this to Brendan, or
I told
just
him later.
you told you
I
that
didn't
to
tell him.
yourself?
I told that to myself. Okay. So we got accepted. We flew down for the interview. We got accepted. Well, they called that night to tell him that he got accepted, but he had put me down as a co-founder on the application because he thought it would be more likely to get in with a technical co-founder. And at that time, I think he'd give me maybe 1.5% of the company in options, or had committed to give me that. And so he wrote that down on the application, how much equity we had. And his brother was the other one. And they called and they said, you're in if, he's like, the problem is, the number one reason for companies not making it out of Y Combinator or failing is founder disputes. And he's like, if they don't have enough equity, that's not enough skin in the game. He's like, your two co-founders need to have 10% equity, or you can't come in. We won't let you in.
Wow.
And so you got to understand, Brandon literally liquidated his 401k to make Weave happen and to pay the consulting company to make the product. And so he had to go to his wife and say, we need to give away 20% of the company to get into Y Combinator. You can imagine like the decision there was like super hard, right? Like, and I remember him like just being in the corner of the airport. Jared and I were just sitting there going like, oh freak, what just happened? Like what's going on? And yeah, he came back and he said, well guys, I'm going to do it. Him and Lindsay, his wife, agreed. They gave us the 10%. We ended up giving a 1.5% each. So I ended up with 8.5% to our first sales guy as well, so that he had 3%. And never brought it up again. From then on, I was a co-founder. He never talked about it, never held it over my head. I get a little bit emotional because he was so great about it. Like, he just treated me like a co-founder from then on forever. Like, he still doesn't say anything about it, like, ever. Like, he's just like, you're a co-founder. It's just the way it was. And I was just like, that's awesome. Like, so he, like, one guy that believes in you, like, changes your life. Right from then on. And I was going to leave the company, like essentially if we got in, right? And I was like, so it was awesome. So I had the 8.5%. And then, even though we had struggled financially, I mean, admittedly we spent too much money, right? Like Brandon was a big spender, but our customers always loved us. And so we always had product market fit. And so it just from the get-go. And so I always believed in the product, even when we were struggling. And then, we got into Y Combinator. All of a sudden you have access to capital because you're in the cool kid club in the Bay Area. And we got to take off from there. So it was really cool. Not that we didn't have our ups and downs for sure, but it was
one of the things I wrote down in your intro that I didn't say is that you may be the kindest person that I know. And so if anyone deserves to be in that role, like, it should be you. So
well, that's
I'm
nice
stoked
of you to say.
that it was you.
I appreciate that. I don't know if that's entirely true, but sometimes I think when you think of CTOs, it was funny. We interviewed a VP of marketing at Weave, and she was great, Courtney. And she worked at Weave for a couple years there, maybe a few years, I can't remember. But I was scheduled as one of her interviews. She had never met me before, but she saw the CTO was on it. And after the interview, she was like, every CTO interview I've ever done, they've all been complete assholes. Like, I was like, she was like, I was super confused that you were like so kind and like nice in your questioning, and you weren't trying to like trip me up or make me look bad. I was like, what kind of people are like got these big companies? Like Brandon and Jared and I just were super naive to like the sociopath, like crazy leadership. Like that wasn't us.
As I'm hearing you sharing that story, it kind of took me back when Court brought me on board, and you said, having a leader that believed in me, and it just kind of made me reflect on my journey with Court. And he took a chance on me, just believed in me, and should probably have you walk out the door so that I can talk about this, so you're not too good. But I'm just thinking about the difference he made. I remember I had been at Aspen for 3 months, and I had this conversation with Court, and I just remember leaving that conversation feeling like I can make as many mistakes, and I can just go and try really hard, and I'm just free. This is a playground for me, and it just allowed me to also play bigger, because I knew that if I failed, he had my back, because he believed in me. So that belief that he had in you made you stay. But how did that also affect your performance?
So it's exactly what you just said. It was the exact same situation where he just trusted me. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he wasn't a technical person, but he was just like, you know what, like, I see potential in Clint. Whether he's going to make mistakes or not, like, is fine. But he basically just let me run technology, right? We made the decisions, and he trusted that, you know, we were going to do our best to make the best business decisions from the technical side and things like that. And we didn't always, but I think we did a pretty good job. But even like sometimes when things went bad, right? We were running a phone system. That was what we did, which I know feels like it's a commodity, but it's hard to run an open source phone system over the internet, right? If the internet has any glitches at all, or your system has any glitches at all, and all of a sudden dental offices don't have phone service, like, they are pissed, right? And support phones ring off the hook if your system's having problems. And so we had problems. And our worst one that I can remember was we had a long outage in like October, and then a long outage again in November. So almost like back-to-back months. And we had like 3% cancel, like customers cancel. And our Series A investor like told Brandon, he's like, you just got to fire Clint, like, fire him. And Brandon's like, nope. I was like, what?
Amazing.
I probably would have fired me. I don't know.
So 3 customers out of how many?
No, 3% of customers.
Oh, 3%.
Yeah, so like a big drop. Yeah, like at the time, you know, at that time, every customer meant so much revenue to us. So, yeah.
So I'm curious about your how you funded this. Y Combinator, you got a check there. Was that the very first check, or there was something before
Brandon raised money from friends and family, which I don't recommend.
Okay. Why?
Oh, it caused some strain in his family for sure when things weren't going well, right? He had a rich uncle and aunt, and when things didn't go well, it caused strain, right? And I think it's all patched up now, but
when you
it took a while. Well, it took a while.
1.8 billion, it can patch some stuff up.
Yeah, I mean, they liquidated early, but I mean, the founder of Divvy it was his money that he invested in Weave, and then he liquidated it early. And I remember thinking, like, he's crazy. And then he took it to Divvy. Now he's a billionaire. So I guess it's okay.
One way or another.
One way or another, he got it. Yeah, so good for him.
So family and friends, Y Combinator, and then how many?
Well, yeah, family and friends, Brandon's 401k. Then we got into Y Combinator, and that really kept us going. And they give you not a ton of money. But then it's like $150,000, if I remember. But then we were able to raise our Series A even before demo day. We were kind of the belle of the ball there because we were further along than a lot of the other companies, and we were growing really well. And so they picked Brandon to go first at demo day, but they introduced us to a lot of their favorite investors. And even at the time, I was so naive to how much money was in the Bay Area. Like this is back when Sam Altman wasn't the president of YC yet. It was like just a few months before. And so he was a partner there, and he did our interview, right? And then he ended up asking us, like, I can't remember if it was him or our advisor asked us, what do you need to grow faster? And at the time we were selling the hardware, like the phones, to the dentist. They had to pay like $2,000+ up front just to get their new phone system. And it was a huge cash outlay. And Brandon told him, like, hey, I want to give the phones away for free. He's like, I think we can get the money back in the annual recurring revenue. And they're like, how much do you need? And he's like, I don't know, like 500,000. You know, at the time I'm thinking, good luck. Yeah, I was like, what's going to happen here? And it was like, okay. And he literally wrote a check for $200K from Sam Altman to our company right then. And he got other partners to give the other 300, like in a matter of 2 days. Like, and it was like not egregious terms. Like they didn't gouge us. It was very friendly. And I remember sitting there going like, what is happening? What's happening? We'd been turned down everybody in Utah. Like no one cared. No one knew about us. No one. And then all of a sudden, Sam Altman, and he became the president of YC later. They had to make a rule that partners couldn't invest in the companies because it was signaling to other investors that, who the best companies were.
Why do you think no one cared in Utah? Like you guys go all the way there and it seemed like it was so easy.
I think what happens is, when you get into Y Combinator, that's whether right or wrong, it provides a signal that, you know, this group of technologists believe in you. So that was part of it. Also, the just sheer amount of money there, I just had no idea. Like, Sam Altman was already rich, and now he's CEO of OpenAI. Like, it's, you know, it's like he's very rich. And so to invest a seed investment of $100K or $200K for them was nothing. And out here, we felt like it was like they just wanted the best deal. Like, we got, the only offer we ever got was like revenue-based financing, and they're like, you have to pay us 30% of your revenue over like 5 years. You're like, what? How do we operate if we're paying you 30% of our revenue? And everyone it just was a different ecosystem. There wasn't as much money. But
And what year was that?
that would have been 2013.
Okay.
We got accepted to Y Combinator in 2013, and we went in January 2014, and we moved out to the Bay Area for 3 months for that.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So do you feel like do you feel like the scenario in Utah is different now?
It's getting better for sure. There's a lot more early seed stage investors are trying to be. I don't know what it is right now. I'm guessing it's probably pretty rough, but it's certainly better than it was. Right. There's a couple new orgs out there that are exclusively focused on seed stage in Utah, which is great. Mm-hmm.
If you're giving advice to an entrepreneur that's looking to fund their business and they know that they want to raise capital, how do you prioritize the relationship with the investor and alignment there versus the terms and valuation?
I would always put terms first.
Really? Why?
Only because investors are going to tell you that they provide value. I have yet to see it. Like, there's no value there. Like, when you're IPOing, sure, yeah, once you get that far, they have a bunch of financial people. They can help guide you, you know, things like that. But as far as like business advice, other things like that, unless they were like an operator really recently, I think the half-life on operational knowledge is pretty short. Like, it's like, if you haven't been an operator for 4 years, like, I really don't care what you have to say anymore, because it's like you don't know what you're talking about probably. And maybe that's just the caliber of investors we have, and I'll openly say that on here. That was probably part of it. But I just don't think there's as much value as people say there is. It's just, you're just there for the money. Like, give me the money and I'll give you a return. That's what you're trying to get. So the terms are most important.
I'm going to move into, I want to ask you a bunch of other questions, but you just segued perfectly into the poll. You guys have billboards all over, people, not employees. Culture is a massive focus. You mentioned to me that you guys had over 80, your internal NPS, your employee NPS score was over 80 multiple times.
Wow.
Which is insane. Like, people don't, that number is from negative 100 to 100, and being close to what, like 20 to 30 would be great. And you guys were,
I'm pretty sure investors didn't believe us.
That's the highest I've ever heard of.
Yeah, it was real. Now, granted, the timing of the survey was probably a little suspect because it was like right after Christmas party. You know,
whatever it was, you guys pulled that number.
Yeah, I mean, we did it once a quarter, but yeah, still.
Tell me how you handled the dynamic of being a co-founder and being very culturally focused, and then when that becomes in competition with shareholder value and return.
Yeah. One of the things let's talk about the competition between the shareholder value and the return. I do not think they're in competition at all, if I'm being straight.
Culture and shareholder value.
No, I think they go hand in hand. The problem is, I think a lot of investors don't think that way necessarily, or they say they think that way, but when push comes to shove, they maybe, like when it comes to dollars, it doesn't feel that way. And I think, you know, you have to make the right decisions. I'm not saying be irresponsible with money, but one of the things that I think we got absolutely wrong at Weave is we were in conflict with a lot of our investors from the get-go. And so there wasn't a lot of trust there. And so when we wanted to do things differently outside of the norm, they didn't like it. But I would say this, that if you can build a great culture at your company, especially at a startup, the retention was so high that it allowed us to make all sorts of mistakes, and it didn't affect you nearly as much because everyone had institutional knowledge and they didn't leave. There was no having to transfer it to someone else. Like, I went 3 years in the dev department and lost 3 engineers. out of like, I think we were pushing 50, 60 engineers, and I lost 3.
Wow.
At a time, it was like highly competitive for engineering, right? So it's hard sometimes to put a money value on that, but I think if you can tell the right story to your investors, if you are a good CEO, you're spending at least 30% of your time maybe on selling the board, right, on your vision, and that's got to be part of it, which is like, here's why we're doing the cultural things we're doing, here's the monetary value we get out of it, and here's what it allows us to do. And if you just say, look, we're retaining the best, we're hiring the best employees, and we're retaining the best employees, and this is the efficiencies we're getting. Like, I think they would have been shocked if they saw how much we hadn't automated at Weave. Like, we just put it off. All engineering was going towards revenue generating products the whole time. And meanwhile, support and onboarding were just taking the brunt of it with manpower because we were just focused on growth.
And is that because you had disciplined, good working people?
I think that was part of it. I mean, we needed more automation. We probably needed to transition to that earlier. But if you had if you had constantly had turnover there, you wouldn't, support would have been terrible.
Yeah.
Right? They wouldn't even know how to solve the problems when customers called in. And so you'd lose customers. You'd get churn. But we had record low churn for an SMB company most of the time. Granted, some of that was because of the industry we're in. We had dentistry. They're a little bit more stable. When you're selling to SMB, a lot of SMBs just go out of business, and so you're going to get churn from people. It's not like they don't like your product, but they just disappear. In dental, we didn't have that as much, but even for dental-specific companies, our churn was really, really low. So
how do you, 2 questions, how do you create a world-class culture? And question 2, if your culture's crap, how do you fix it?
Yeah, I would say creating a world-class culture is all about just the executive team spending the time on it. If you're deliberate and you care about your culture and you spend time on it, you can make it better, right? I do think if you're trying to change the entire company's culture, it has to come from the top down. Now, I'm not to say you can't change the culture of your team, your sales team, your engineering team. You totally can. And when we were at Weave and we started getting big enough, it was the engineering team and my team that we came up with our core values first before the company did, probably like a year before. Because we were trying to drive a great culture. And that's just something that Brandon and I and Jared all aligned on. Like, we wanted to have a great culture. We cared about our people. We wanted to be the best place to work in Utah. That was just part of our passion. It was part of the reason why we wanted to build a business in the first place, was because we wanted to provide jobs for people and provide great jobs for people that they loved working at. So it's all about the time, studying it. Look at the great cultures out there. Like Netflix, I feel like changed the world in a lot of ways when they released that culture deck. It was incredible. And so we modeled a lot of our early culture off of that. And now it's like, that's like 25 years old or 20. I don't even know. It's pretty old, 15 years old. And I think some of the things in there are still pretty timeless. But now there's like books upon books. And,
yeah. If you can you tell us about a few things that you guys did at Weave that made the culture so great?
I think just the way that we put prioritization. So Brandon came up with what he called the 3 Ps. It was people, then product, then profits, in that order. And so that's the way we always tried to make our goals and everything. It was like, okay, we announced the quarter goals, and it was like, here are the things we're doing for people, our employees. Like, here's the things we're trying to make better for you. Here's either more benefits or it's operational excellence. Here's what we're trying to do for you there. And then it was like, now here's our product goals, and now here's the sales goals that we have on top of all these other 2. And so that was the priority that we put in place, and I think that made the employees feel like, oh yeah, they care about us. And then it was every single executive meeting that we had that took a portion of our time. Like, how are we going to work on the people? And if you take the time, you'll come up with cool ideas, right? And people and it's awesome, right? We started offering, like, what are some low-cost things that we could do? And it was like, we should take care of all the expecting mothers at Weave. And when they have a baby, we gave them house cleaning for 3 months. Like, someone would come for once a week, which you think, oh, that's a lot. It's not a lot. Like, if you think from a bonus perspective, right? It's not a ton. Gave them free diapers for a year, right? Like, little things like that. That's like, the employees will love you for it, and it doesn't cost a ton. Do you know what I'm saying? But it just shows you care. And it's not like, there's easy things to do to show that you care to your employees. And it doesn't always have to be perks and benefits. There's other things too, like management trainings and things like that, which we totally could have done better on at Weave. But it's like, how do we help them with their careers? How do we help them move up? Those type of things. So
I love that. Can you?
No, you're just gonna say take care of your people and they take care of your business, right?
Totally. I hope it didn't become too cultish in some ways, but it did. It was pushing the line maybe. Where people were like really, really loved Weave, like to the point where it was like, well, we're still a business, and if you find a better job somewhere, you should take it. Like, don't stay at a lower paying job here as a sign of loyalty, because it's like, we're still a company. Like, go take care of yourself. It's fine. Yeah.
How do you fix a culture gone wrong?
I mean, I've thought about this a bunch of times, like how I would do this, like in an engineering department. I don't know. I take notes on like what my playbook would be. I don't know if there's one answer for all of it, but my first move, if I came in as like a VP of engineering or a CTO into an engineering department that had a bad culture, is to do a one-on-one with every single employee. And I would ask them, what do you think the culture should be like? What do you think the culture is like now? What do you like and not like? And then what do you think it should be like? And then I'd take all those responses and figure out like, what is the culture of this company? And then work with the executive team on like, what do you want the culture to be? And then you shape it and you define it and you say, this is what we're going for. Like, get on board.
The definition around it, I think, is critical, because with culture, it's like this fluffy, ethereal thing that people can't easily define.
Yeah, if you're trying to put definitions around it, there's a couple models that you can use. Obviously, there's ways to measure it as well. Like Google popularized the Western model, which is like measuring your psychological safety. How safe do people feel to bring up issues is a big one. That's typically a good culture, a generative culture will have people feeling safe to say if something's wrong. Because if they don't, they feel like they'll be punished for saying something's wrong. And that's when you get companies that are pretty terrible to work at if everyone feels unsafe. And then there's some other culture models I think I have on my website where they actually define different quadrants of cultures, and you can look and see like which way do you want to lean in your culture, what type of culture do you want. And it puts more definition and actually numbers around it. You can survey your employees.
What's your website?
clintberry.com, but you'll have to find that old blog post. I think it's measuring your engineering culture. That's the name of the blog post, and it's just a short one, and it just says 3 ways to measure. So, yeah.
Love it. So you talked about Brandon. From what you said and how you said it, it sounds like you feel like he's the greatest.
I'm not that he's perfect, but yeah, he's a great leader.
How, for a non-technical CEO, how do you get the very best out of your development resources?
You need to have a great technical leader. If you're not the technical founder of your company, you need either a technical co-founder who's awesome, or you need to hire a great leader, because there's so many things in the technical side that you won't be able to know or execute on as a CEO. And I feel like Brandon was very good at just saying like, you go make this the best ever. And that's what I did or tried to do. And you could talk to a lot of my ex-employees that would say we weren't perfect at all, but we at least tried, and I think our employees saw that we tried.
So tell me about the one time that the Series A investors like, hey, you guys screwed up, lost 3%.
Yeah.
And you need to fire Clint. He didn't know. I'm guessing Brandon didn't know how to code.
He didn't.
But he still figured out how to get the best out of you to make you love your time at Weave. How did that dynamic work?
He didn't even tell me that Ronnie asked for that. So I didn't even know until like 3 years later. It's funny because Ronnie is my seed investor at Kolla. But yeah, I think the key was he didn't want me to be afraid, right? I think if we couldn't have fixed it, if I couldn't have fixed it ever, like if it would have gone on for another 3 months, we would have had to do something. At a bare minimum, even if he still wanted me to be there because we'd gotten close and he felt like I still should be there, he probably would have hired another like CTO over me and we would have figured it out. But we figured it out for the most part. Outages became less and less frequent. I hired some great VoIP engineers. At the time when we were having the biggest problems, I was the only guy. So we had all these other engineering teams working on the other products, and I was running the phone system. It was a nightmare. Like no sleep in the Kolla with the original consultant who helped build it out, right? And it was brutal. Like it was a rough time. I'm feeling anxiety right now. Like it was rough. Yeah.
Can we touch on that anxiety a little bit? What was call them the fetal position in the shower moments? Guessing over the decade,
Not even
there were
fetal
one
position
or
is
two
so
of
much,
those.
but it was even like, I remember Gabe, the original consultant, Gabe Gunnarsson, he ran a consulting firm called Izeni, and they built the initial product. And so I got to work with him for the first 3 years, like really closely, and he helped transition it to me. And he's a great mentor, an outstanding leader, and now is the co-founder at Previ, Brandon's new thing, his new company. And I love that guy. He's so great. But, I mean, he told me that outages were so scary that at one point he would prop up his phone while he showered to make sure there was no notifications coming in and there was outages. Like that's how impactful they were. And you can imagine just being stressed all the time because we were growing at some point so fast that I couldn't keep up on the infrastructure. I couldn't keep up. Like it was hard to keep up. We couldn't host it on the cloud in the early days because of call quality. Like the latencies were too high. And so we were on bare metal servers, like in colos. Like it was brutal. And so once we felt like the latencies got better, we moved it to the cloud. And then of course scaling becomes at least a little bit easier. But we bought these 5 servers that we had run off for the initial product. And we were end of lifing them quick because we were growing so fast. And so we had built this whole new infrastructure. We were getting ready to transition over, and they were starting to fail. And so we had to move over way earlier than we thought we would. And it was super scary. And it ended up working. And we kept those other servers just as like internal stuff, and they all died within the next 6 weeks. Like we would have been toast. And so those were those scary moments. But you know, you end up pulling through. I think part of the problem was I didn't have any VoIP experience before Weave. And then Brandon's just like, you'll figure it out. Like, I did. I'd still say I'm probably an intermediate VoIP developer because there's so much to know and so much history. But we figured it out. So,
what's the worst it ever got? I think people see you on this side of it and like, yeah, happy family, beautiful kids, beautiful wife, the exit. But what was the lowest you got in that decade?
The outages sucked, right? But it takes a toll on your family too when you have to do that. So it's like, those first 3 years, I probably averaged a 70 to 80 hour week. Averaged. And didn't take a single vacation. And I didn't know it would be like that, right? When I told my wife that it'd be a lot of work and I'd have to put in a lot of hours, I didn't expect it to be like that, but I think part of it was just the learning curve was so steep for building a phone system when you didn't have that experience, and I didn't have the computer science background that I needed, so it was like a fire hose, and I had to learn fast, and thankfully had some great mentors to do it. But that was probably the hardest, was like having outages. I'm never home. I never take vacations. My wife went to Europe without me with our 1.5-year-old, and she was pregnant, and her 90-year-old grandma by herself. She had a sister that lived over there, but they flew over there by themselves. And it was just like, it sucked. And I remember like probably after that, when she came home from Europe, so we would have been, it was 2000, maybe 2015, I'm thinking. Maybe it was before then. Anyway, when the times got hard and I just told Melissa, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm like, I should probably just go and tell Brandon sorry. And she was like, heck no, you're not quitting. She's like, I've sacrificed more for this company than you have. Like, it's like, you are sticking it out. And I'm like, she didn't say it like that. She's like the kindest person ever. But it essentially was that. I was like, she's like, you shouldn't quit. She's like, you need to see this through. And you know, thankfully we did, you know, and because sometimes you're not sure if you're going to make it when the bad things happen. You're like, I don't know if we're going to make it. We almost ran out of money 4 times and just barely got bailed out by raising money each one of those times.
Wow.
Kudos to Brandon. He's an incredible fundraiser. Relentless fundraiser, I would say. Burns bridges as if he has to. Just gets the money.
No, knowing how hard it was, are you glad would you do it again?
I think if I would have had, if it was day one, I'm married, having our first kid, and you show me my future, just like the next few years of weave, and not shown the long tail, there's no way. I would have been like, no, this is terrible. But if you see the whole picture, absolutely I'd do it again. Absolutely. Because it ends up, we got lucky in this case, right? We made it through. What really is hard is the people that, which is more often than not, that put in those hours, put in that hard work, and the company doesn't make it. Even then, though, what I found is talking to some of those founders who have not made it, is the amount of learning they get from doing it, it's still worth it. And I was like, okay, I could see that. But it's nice when you make it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same question, but then I was gonna ask a follow-up one was, people that are listening to this, they're in that stage right now. All that they can see is the long hours. They're away from family. What do you tell them?
First of all, I would tell them, right, so I'm doing it again, for better or for worse. We even raise money again, so there's pressure to perform. And what I would say to you is you don't have to put in typically you don't have to put in the 80-hour weeks. I think this time around, I've definitely spent way more amount of time optimizing my schedule and not wasting any time, because I'm not going to spend 80-hour weeks away from my family anymore. That's not happening. And so I need to figure out how to get the output of a startup founder without the hours. And that means you have to be very diligent about your time, very focused about your hours, blocking it all out perfectly if you can. Because if you have a family and you're trying to pull this off, it's not worth missing the time with your family. You know what I'm saying? So I would say be very diligent about your schedule. And there's a couple blog posts that I can find we can put in the notes that I've seen some other CEOs do and that I've been trying. And I literally, in my Gmail calendar, so the calendar is what I live and die by now. It's just my calendar. And I have everything categorized. So everything's like, this appointment is for sales. Like this point, I think I put this one as like networking is what I categorize it under. And then you can measure your time. And you're like, am I spending my time in the right places? This percentage of time was spent on sales and marketing tech stuff. This was on development. This was on network. I think, I'm 40 now, so I think it ended up being a lot more of my time was spent on network, like going to lunch with friends or meeting with other business people. It ended up being like 20% of my time in a week, which is fine. Like I love my network. I don't know if I want to change that. But I think being very deliberate about the time is crucial.
That makes me feel so bad that every time that Court and I, we walk in here, we talk to you and we distract you.
Oh, no.
I just now
Like
feel so bad.
Network is great. And sharing an office with you guys is about the best thing ever. We love energy, you guys bring a great energy. And so we need to find some more companies like you guys to get them in the office too. So, because you guys are gone a lot too. So something like yesterday, I was like by myself the whole day. I was like, this is terrible.
We'll come more often.
Yeah, come in more often.
Clint, when you got to this level of success, and I hope that people on the interview actually get to meet you too, because you carry yourself as somebody that has zero judgment or ego around other people, and it's the coolest thing to be around you. People just
thank
have
you.
That is true.
Absolutely no idea. Same thing as about your family. I'm curious, what was similar to, you have all these visions, took you 10 years, you have all these ideas of what the future is going to look like and how you're going to be different, your bank account's going to be different. What things were like, oh yeah, that's exactly how I envisioned it, and then what things surprised you that they were different?
That's an awesome question. I mean, you always think monetarily you're going to do well. I don't think I knew how well. And even then, if you looked at how much money I made versus how much we've IPO'd for it was worth, it wasn't very much, relatively, but it was great for me, So that's always the hope, is that you're going to come out and be a little bit more free to do the things that you want. And I think that ended up being great. That hope came to fruition. And now I can start another company, and I can run a not-for-profit, and I can basically just have the freedom. Like, that's what I value most of all, is having the freedom to do what I want with my time. Maybe some of the things that I didn't expect that I wish I would have been more deliberate about when I started is when you're starting a company and you're the founder at the beginning stages, you're doing it. You do everything, right? And there's a certain type of skill set that's great at being a generalist. And I think I do excel there on the generalist side. But as you get bigger, right, you hire from the engineering side, like I hire engineers. Now you're an engineering manager, and you have to be a good manager. And now you have multiple teams, so you're hiring engineering managers, and now I have to figure out how to be a good director. And then you hire directors, and you have to figure out how to be a good executive. And every one of those stages is completely different. And if you don't spend the time and can't learn quickly, you need to figure out how to get people into those spots that aren't you. And I think I went quickly enough that we kept Weave going. I think there are a lot of things that I could have done better. And so I guess the thing that surprised me, and I didn't anticipate when I was starting at Weave, is how important leadership would be in my life. Like, you have to be a good leader when you scale. Because if you're not, you'll lose people, you'll have crappy culture, those type of things. People quit their managers, so.
Leadership is another thing that's kind of ethereal. How do you define great leadership?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is probably the stupidest answer ever, but it was like I just read so many leadership books all the time. I was like, how did the greats do it? And you start with Andy Grove from Intel, and you work your way up through the whole history of the most popular management books, and that's kind of how I started. Again, I'm in engineering, and so I put a lot of focus on engineering. And it was so funny because on your bookshelf here, I can't even see it anymore, but
that one?
Yeah, Ask Your Developer, Jeff Lawson. So yeah, I know Jeff, not very well. He wouldn't remember who I was, but I've met him a few times. And somehow that book wasn't on my radar, and so that's still one I need to read.
You are the developer. It's for people like me that can't code that we're supposed to ask you questions.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, it looked like it would be good for any engineering leader too. But yeah. So I don't know if I have a definition of leadership, but I would say this, that my favorite quote was from Reed Hastings, who was on the Reed Hoffman's podcast. Do you remember what it's called? I can't remember. It's a startup podcast. So you have the two Reeds there and there. I ended up listening to the unabridged interview, just the full interview. I can't remember why, because I was driving somewhere far. I don't normally do that. And he asked him this question that didn't make it into the podcast somehow, but it changed my life. I was like, this is amazing. He was like, Reed Hoffman's to Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, was like, hey, to me, you're like the quintessential CEO. You're like one of the best CEOs ever. What tips and tricks do you have for managers to be great leaders like you? And he said, he's like, I don't really believe in the tips and tricks. He's like, that's hokey. He's like, to me, if you want to be a better manager, become a better person. He's like, the best managers are the best people. How you treat people, kindness and respect and helping them grow their career. And I was like, dude, that's a brilliant definition of leader. Just become a better person. And I saw that happen to Brandon, who, he had a couple different CEO coaches. And as he progressed through Weave, he just became not only a better leader, he became a better person, a better husband, a better friend. And I was like, when I was thinking about starting another company, starting Kolla, and I was debating should I do it or not, that was one of the deciding factors. I was like, I want to be a better person, and the CEO position is a huge growth opportunity and will help you become a better person if you have that in mind. So
it also brings a lot of weight with it as well. Have you felt that?
Yes. And I think there's more weight to be felt still. Right now it's just me and Jason, but I still feel it even with just Jason, because Jason's just one of those, my co-founder is one of those brilliant 10X engineers that could go be making $700K at Netflix. And so when he's making $120K at Kolla, you're like, that's a big opportunity cost. This better have a huge outcome. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure there to make sure that happens. So,
are you gonna ring the bell with Kolla?
I I don't know if I'll ring the bell. Maybe. I think the key for me is I always build a company like it's going to be a long-term, huge company. I think if you're trying to build it, so, we'll sell it at 100 million or something, then you'll make decisions trade-offs that are short-term and don't work out. So I just assume it will be big. Whether I'm the leader or not, we're going to make decisions that are for the long term.
It's incredible. You talked about the books that you're just reading a lot of books. We have this podcast is mostly for entrepreneurs and sales leaders. What are your recommendations? The best 3 books for leadership?
You know what? I have a list somewhere. I can't think of them off the top of my head. We could put them in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll do that.
But they're not going to be surprising. Like when you go through, you'll be like, oh yeah, well, everyone says that one. So it won't shock you. Obviously, like some of like the more relatively recent ones that have, really impacted me on, you guys have commented that you feel like I'm really nice. And I think I love that trait, and I never want to not be nice. But I think true kindness to employees and peers and managers is also giving very candid feedback. And so radical candor is a really popular one that helps you with that. And I think we kind of had that problem, at least in our engineering department and maybe in our entire culture at Weave, where we were so kind that we didn't do feedback well. Who did I listen to? Was it Shopify's from Canada, right? And they said they kind of had that problem with their employees. Like everyone's Canadian, they're all like super polite. And so we had to put this, like, we had to institute this very like structured feedback process so that they would give feedback. And so I think, as Kolla gets bigger, I think we're gonna have to do that, especially if we hire a lot in Utah where like politeness is kind of like the default, where we're like, hey, like true kindness is helping people grow. And sometimes that means hard conversations. And so just creating a structure around it so people feel comfortable doing it hopefully won't make that mistake again. But it's hard for me. It's hard for me to have those hard conversations with people. I don't love it. Yeah.
I love that. I did have a question. We hear a lot of people on the internet. They're saying just find what you love. Just do what you love. If you're gonna build a business or if you're gonna build a career, just find that one thing. It's rare, and it's not that common that people actually find. And I feel like you're one of those people that found you're passionate about it. You said that you love coding.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about
that? I'll tell you a little bit more about that, and I'll give you my opinion on that too. I do feel extremely lucky that in my career I get to do something that I love, right? I do love programming so much and could do it for hours upon end. And I think part of it is not just the coding itself, but I love creating. And code allows you to almost build anything you could ever imagine, right? In the digital space, right? But you can build software to do so much and automate your life and make people make their lives better. But look, if you would ask me when I was a teenager, like, oh, do you want to build software for dentists? Like, it's not like, oh yeah, that's my passion. Like, I love dentists. It turns out I do love a small business and I love helping small business. So there is some passion there. But I think when people say you got to do what you love and not do anything else, that's usually what rich people say after they've made it. And you're like, oh, what'd you do? And he's like, oh, I sold textiles. I'm like, was that your passion? Like when you were 12 and someone asked what you wanted to grow up? Yeah, I sold textiles. It's like, no, dude. He's like, I'm a metallurgical engineer. I'm like, cool, dude. Is that your passion? Great. But most of the time it's like you need to learn to love the grind, right? And I am lucky in that I love business operations. I love culture. And so when it came time to build a big business, that's one thing I do miss when I'm in a startup is I love those big business problems. I love solving culture problems and people problems at a big scale. It was so fun for me to get operationally excellent. So, yeah.
I love that.
I feel like that's rare to be analytical from the technical side and also love people problems.
Well, if I...
And maybe that's just an off stereotype that I have.
To a non-technical person, you maybe look at me and be like, oh yeah, he's really technical. They make fun of me like at the engineering meetups because they're like, they know I'm not technical anymore, right? No, I'm dead serious. Like, they're like, we have this little hack night meetup that people come, and Todd is one of our members of our not-for-profit, and he's very technical, like the stereotypical engineer that knows everything. And so he's always giving me a hard time. Someone came to ask, hey, can I ask you a few questions? And I was like, is it technical? And I hear Todd in the background. Yeah, because Clint can't answer those. And, it was sometimes hard, even when I was younger. Like, yeah, I started programming when I was 12. I should be the best programmer in the world, right? But then my best friend, who I grew up with, Jason, we've been programming together since we were 12, right? He got a programming job in high school. He got a PhD in electrical engineering. Like, these are the people that I see them like, oh, that's a technical person. And then it wasn't very long at being Weave, maybe like 2 engineers, where pretty much every engineer we hired was better than I was. So, and Jason will give me some credit. He's like, Clint, you figure things out. You're a great engineer. Great. I am technical. I have enough experience in the background that I can do things, and I program every day. But he's like literally 10 times faster. Like, it's not even close. Like, he's so much better than I am. No. So I would say I'm probably lean more to the people side than most technical people.
And hats off to you to be able to put your ego aside to hire people that are way better than you.
Yeah.
Way better is probably wrong.
No.
You would obviously
way better.
I looked at your computer screen and like walking by like, I have no idea what he is working on.
Yeah, I mean,
could not do that.
non-technical
Like,
people, it seems so
purebred.
foreign, but I promise, like, technical people are like, yeah, this is very standard stuff that I'm doing. It's nothing special. But yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. But
Tell me, I have one more question, Carlos. Anything you want to ask before we wrap?
I have one more question as well.
Okay, cool. I'll go first and then let Carlos wrap up. Your advice to your 26-year-old self.
oh man, I was a late bloomer, right? And so 26-year-old self was not deliberate. Very go with the flow. I was doing websites back then, wasn't married, and I probably worked 15 hours a week and would go boating any chance I got. And I didn't have a boat, so it was like any friends that had boats or whatever. My dad ended up getting a boat, thankfully, and so I got to take that out. But it was different. I wish I could have maybe started a little bit younger, like in being a little bit more serious in my career. That was a little bit hard for my wife too, who she's a very yellow, like carefree personality that likes to have fun. And she kind of saw that side of me while we were dating. And then as soon as we got married, I'm like, oh, it's time. Like, work. Like, gotta like be successful to have kids. And she's like, what happened to the guy I was dating? I'm like, oh, sorry. Isn't this what we're supposed to do? Like, I don't know. It's like, you were working 15 hours and now you're working 80. Like, what happened? Like, do you not want to hang out with me? I'm like, oh no, that's not it. I just want to make sure we have a lot of money. I don't know. So I would say, be more deliberate with your time, with your people that you love and with work. And, just if you can, be more deliberate with your career. That's what I'd say to my 26-year-old self, because I know I was just kind of like,
I have 2 questions, Clint, actually. You've talked a lot about the nonprofit that you run, and why is that important for you?
Yeah, so I actually started that when I was at Weave. It's actually a 7-year-old organization, maybe a little bit, maybe even 8 years now. I've always wanted to figure out how to give back, and I really love local communities, right? The same way that I like local businesses, I love local communities. And so Utah is a great place, but we also just don't have the population of the Bay Area, the New Yorks, the things like that. And so sometimes when I look at our tech scene, which I think is amazing, it's still hard to compete against a lot of these other big areas. And I listened to, I went to a presentation by Jason Taylor. At the time, I think he was CTO of Podium, and now I think he's at Entrada. But he was like at the meetup, it was a pretty intimate meetup, maybe like 30 people, and he was talking about some architectural things that they were doing at Podium. And he said, I'm going to be really open with you guys and kind of show you how we're doing this, because he's like, the way I look at it is it's kind of us versus them. It's kind of Utah versus the world. And he's like, so you guys are all local businesses here, and I'm going to show you our secrets because I want Utah to succeed in general. And that really resonated with me when he said that. I was like, oh, I love that. And so I just want to give back to this. I love this community. I think we've got great values here. I love the mountains. I love the people here. And I want to figure out how to give back and obviously I think technical education is super important. And that's our mission, is to increase the technical education and talent in Utah. So that's what we're trying to do. We're still small. I think we've, overall in our Slack channel, which is kind of where we keep our membership, we've got about 1,200 people, but most aren't active. And then we just run like 8 meetups that are just free meetups for people to come, and we get presenters and teach. I think once I'm done with Kolla, that will be my full-time gig though, and it will expand a lot faster. So if you guys have any tips on growing it while I'm a startup founder, I'd be happy to take them. Like hiring people to edit. I probably need to hire someone to run it is what I should do.
I love that. In my last question, Clint, we do love the mountains too. That's why we have it there.
Love it.
And love giving back. That's probably why we like you so much, man. You're an amazing person, and you're obviously extremely successful. What's your why?
That's a great question. I wrote it down. You want to pull it out?
Yeah, I would love to hear it.
I basically have just a life mission statement, so we can pull it up, and that way I don't butcher it. I probably should read it enough that. Let's see. I tried to get my values a little bit more crisp this year, but it ends up being a huge mess that I need to organize. But right now, the way my life mission statement that I've iterated on a little bit, I don't know if it'll stay this way, but it's to become the man God wants me to become. Sorry. I need to do better. As I read it, I'm like, suck. I need to read this more. So to become the man God wants me to become, patient, gentle, meek, full of the love of God, kind, stalwart in the gospel, without hypocrisy and guile, while striving for success and improvement in all I do. My note on there, though, is I have this strong desire to make the world a better place, and I don't know how to incorporate that into my life mission statement. Maybe I just need to make it longer. But you can see, obviously I'm a little bit religious there as well, but even religion aside, just the values right there, right? Patient, gentle, meek, kind, stalwart, no hypocrisy and guile, I think is really important to me. But then I also just want to leave an impact on my family, my kids, my wife, and then the world at large around me. I think if everyone in the world was trying to make the world a better place, it would be amazing, right? And I think you look at the people that spend their lives trying to make it better, and they have an impact. And I need to be focused on it even more. But I think that's my why, is I want to leave it better than it was.
And you're doing it.
I hope so. Sometimes it gets a little selfish, when you're putting too much focus on your own pursuits and your own things, and sometimes you can rationalize it away forever, right? You can say oh, but look at all the jobs we're providing, but you're kind of like, come on. It's yeah, that's a good thing too, but really, really, how are you going to impact the world? So I don't know.
That's beautiful, man. Perfect place to end.
Dude, you've been amazing. Thanks for joining us, Clint.
Yeah, thank you guys. You
Thanks,
guys are awesome.
Clint. Appreciate it, man. It's a wrap.
You've been watching Hello Grow, the world's #1 growth podcast. I'm Clint Berry.
I'm Carlos Souza. If you've watched this video so far, it means that you like the content that we're putting out and the people we're interviewing.
We're putting together a community of business leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales leaders. You liking, subscribing, and sharing this content helps us reach those that are going on that journey.
If you want to be a part of this community, please subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on those notifications.